Hey everyone, this is DJ Green. This is episode 4 of the Green Room podcast. I'm here today with one quarter of the Róg Poets, with Mory or. How are you doing today, man? How are you getting on?
Not too bad, man. Very good. Happy to be here. It's Mory, by the way. Just Mory.
My apologies.
The Instagram.
I was kind of confused but when I saw the Instagram name, I was like, that seems like it's more of a username as opposed to his actual artist name.
Exactly, yeah. Well, it's Mory.orr. The orr represents Róg Records.
My apologies.
No worries at all.
Do you want to give us a bit of an introduction into how you got into music, how the Róg Poets came about, and obviously the Ask Gaeilge aspect of your music too?
Well, yeah. I've been at it a while now. Started writing songs when I was only 10 years old. I kind of fell in love with hip hop at a very young age, and I wanted to, take part in it. So I found myself writing raps from a very young age, but they were quite out of touch with reality because, I was listening to a lot of, Eminem and 50 Cent and that kind of stuff back in the day, and
Naturally,
that's what I wanted to mimic. So, I was so young and so naive about the world that I literally tried to make, gangster rap. No, in fairness, I wasn't talking about killing people and stuff. I didn't actually have, that kind of experience in life, but I was still, very much putting on the accent and the whole swag kind of thing.
I guess, yeah.
So it took me quite a while to break out of that. I think I was 14 when I did this kind of course with Dunleary County Council called the Grain Store, and they were basically like doing this thing where they wanted to encourage and sort of nourish young artists around the area, young musicians. So mostly it was, bands and singer-songwriters and stuff coming in. And at that stage I had bought a Bose 8-track recorder, and that's how I first started making my tunes. I used my brother's keyboard, and I would like play beats, but the way I would play the beats was there was no like automation, there was no DAW or anything like that. So I literally on each individual single track I would play the part of the beat, but
I got you.
I had to play it through the whole time, so I didn't even have a metronome. So I'd always start with the drums, and I'd play straight drums into the machine for 4 minutes, and then I'd put in whatever instruments or elements. I just, for the interview for the course, I just walked in with my 8-track recorder, and I just pressed play, and they're like, "Jesus, did you make this?" At like 14 years old, they were quite impressed. And
it is impressive, man, because when I was 14 I certainly wasn't doing anything productive whatsoever, so fair juice.
So, my ma was a piano teacher, and she taught me how to play the keys young enough. So, I started writing lyrics at 10, and I had like these melodies in my head, but it was only like, they were in my head, and I was only able to kind of translate them through a little bit. So then, I just kept learning every step by step. I just knew I wanted to create the song inside and out, not just the lyrics but the beats as well.
I get you.
And it was then there that I met one of the kind of mentors on the course who did like the recording sessions with me, and he was the first person who like sat me down and explained to me why I shouldn't be rapping in this American accent when I speak with a Dublin accent, and just about keeping it real. And like he was the first kind of person to put me down and teach me that. I wasn't actually really listening to much Irish hip hop at the time. Like most people, it took everybody, I think, a while to get used to the Irish accents.
Definitely, yeah.
It took me a while too. But luckily I kind of got that out of the way when I was much younger. So about the age of 14, then I was an avid fan of Irish hip hop as well. So that's kind of like how I got into it. And then I suppose the whole Gaeilge element, I saw, when I was 16 I wrote a song with myself and Ja One. Back in the day, me and him started off together, doing bits. We made a good few tracks together. One of our tunes was called Crack Music, which was basically, it was the instrumental of Anti Up. And
I know it, yeah.
the chorus was just I rapped the chorus in Irish. I think that was actually the first time somebody had proper rapped in Irish, apart from GMC, Cunasatatu, and Des Bishop doing his version of Jump Around. But that was back like 10 years ago now, before Kneecap
longer
or
even, I'd say.
like that. Yeah. And yeah, everybody loved it. It was a relatively big tune around the area. Like, I had like somewhat of a fan base, at a young age, like when I was in secondary school.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people probably didn't take me that seriously, but fuck it, some people still loved it. And yeah, that was like when I wrote my first bit in Irish, and I just kind of didn't think about it for a while, because like I always was a Gaelgore. I went to a Gael school, primary school and secondary school, and
I didn't know lads in Dublin could speak Irish.
well, there's a few Gael schools. There's a few Gael schools around the area. We're a rare breed for sure, but like Dublin Gaelga is a dialect that exists. Like,
Yeah.
but it's very much a revived version of the language. Like, we don't have the kind of the native fluency, so to speak. It's very much learnt from the book. So our pronunciations are quite phonetic.
I get you.
They don't have a strong accent. Like, the way that you be taught Irish in school is the way that we speak it, rather than the way that a native speaker would speak it. Because people from Donegal, Kerry, Galway and Ring, like, they all have very distinct dialects that don't actually sound as much as they should if you pronounce them phonetically. They're all kind of accentuated.
It's kind of like a fusion between actually being kind of growing up with speaking it on some level, and then also learning it in school, as opposed to kind of in Dublin, where it might be you're just kind of learning it in school, really. Like, it's not really being spoken anywhere kind of
Exactly,
on the
yeah.
street, or I get you.
And we don't really have as many opportunities to speak the language, because we're not surrounded by it. Now, I know it's dying off in the Gaeltacht regions a lot as well, but still there's families who grow up speaking the language. Like, I'd be the best, I'd have the strongest grasp of the language in my family. Like now my siblings both speak it too. They both went to Gael schools, and my parents went to Gael schools too, but as you get older and you don't practice a language, you start to forget it.
Yeah, I'm in that position. Like, I can write it no hassle, like, but when I'm actually speaking it, it's not that I can't speak it anymore. It's just that the people I'm speaking to are speaking it all the time, so they're blurting out shit at me, and I'm kind of have to sit there and kind of think, like, for a second, like, what did he actually say to me? Like, whereas, like, a decade ago I was fluent. Like, it's just after school, the only people that are ever speaking to me in Irish are either the Kneecap boys or schmelly old farmers from Connemara on the bus. Like, that's about it. Like, so I can speak it quite well, but like, if you were to speak Irish to me now, like my brain would just stall. Like, so I think it's kind of requires for me a bit more contact and practice again. But then if you were to tell me to write a fucking story in Irish, like, I could write you two pages, no hassle, without even referencing a book or looking
That's
at
very
it up.
interesting. Well, it's funny, like, I kind of felt the same, because I left school, now I'm 26 now, so I left school about 8 or 9 years ago.
Same as myself, yeah.
And it was a while, we kind of, all the lads I went to school with, a lot of us kind of did let the language slip a bit. And I think it was in my final year of college, I decided for my project that I would start a radio show on Radio na Litha. And once I started doing it, I was like, Jesus, I've actually lost a lot of my fluency. And it kind of took me a while to kind of get back into it. So, like, the level of my Irish in the first episode compared to, a good few episodes into the show was drastically different. But
Yeah.
all it took was just putting your mind back in that state of Irish, and kind of, like, the language is still there in your head. You just need to wake it back up again. And doing this radio show on Radio na Litha is kind of what helped me to, kick it back into full swing. And even now, like, I haven't done many of the radio shows recently. In fact, I haven't done one in over a year and a half. Just because, the studio on Radio na Litha is closed. You can't get into it. And to do the show that I was doing from home is just, it's a real hassle. Do you know what I mean? I was doing a music show where every week I would, talk about a subgenre of music in great detail, but like these subgenres weren't like grime or drill or trap. It was like Southeast Asian funk from the 70s, or fucking Mongolian and Turkic traditional music. Like I listen to mad shit, like literally the craziest shit from all over the world.
As do I, yeah.
Loads of Slavic hip hop and French and German hip hop and
Tibetan throat singing and all that sort of stuff.
Oh yeah, all that kind of crack. So I was doing shows where you kind of have to do a lot of research to know what you're talking about, and then from that research you have to go and find all the songs that you want to use in the show, and then you have to drag them into the session and everything. Like I just don't have a very streamlined way of doing it, and the amount of time it takes me to put a show together is about 10 hours at least. When I'm working full time, it's just very hard to find, with my 2 spare days off, I don't want to spend one of them doing something where, no offense to Radio and Liff, I love yous and all, but you don't get paid either. So it's kind of hard. Whereas if I had access to the studio, all I have to do is show up, literally speak into the mic, play the tunes and go home, and there's no extra work involved. So once Radio and Liff is back open, you'll probably see me back on the airwaves again. But until then, it's too much of a hassle. You know what I mean? But yeah,
I get you.
But that's why that's how I was able to like wake up my Irish speaking brain again through writing these scripts and just getting back into it, and kind of making an effort to speak the language again. Just reminding myself to think in the language from time to time. Because when I try to write a song in Irish, it can be quite difficult. Like my Irish thinking brain doesn't think half as much as I do in my English thinking brain. Especially like when it comes to writing rhymes. You've been listening to, classic hip hop for your entire life, where like, words that rhyme in a rapper's brain, it's just a natural thing. The more you write raps, when you hear a word, you're already thinking of other words that it rhymes with, because regardless of stuff that you've done or just other songs that you've heard from other artists, like
it's beaten into you, like
exactly, and it's just subconsciously inside you. Whereas there isn't Irish hip hop, before, apart from myself, Kneecap, MC Muppade,
Sullivan,
Oisín Mac and Sulawan, that's it. Like there's no one else, and we haven't had it's not like something that people have grown up on, or that I had the chance to grow up listening to. So when
I've started using it more myself as well.
Yeah,
like if I've actually been able to if I have an English rhyme and actually I could rhyme this fucking Irish sentence, and when I was like, why not throw it in? Because someone overseas might not know what the fuck I'm on about, but why not just make as much use of it as possible? I kid myself and think I could write something seriously good. That's
I started
all Irish,
doing that myself as well, like just throwing in a few fuckle when it actually just fit better than something in English. Yeah. But it makes it harder to write in Irish when you don't have a natural go-to kind of rhyme scheme. Now I'm sure Sulawan, for example, has a lot less difficulties than I do, because he is a native speaker, and you can tell that he's got pure, fluent Kerry Irish, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm quite jealous of his ability of the language. You know what I mean? Because his dialect of Kerry Irish is so fluent and native that I kind of struggle to understand, some of the things that he's saying.
Oh, naturally, the dialects are quite different. Like, just because you can speak Irish, someone from Connemara doesn't mean you understand someone from Donegal. Like,
exactly, and he's rapping, so fast and stuff, like using, just kind of fluency that, like, when me and the lads were, talking to each other in school, we were all on the kind of same level of, not being natively fluent, but just, what we've learned in school. Like, if I sit down and try and listen to like the state Irish is really difficult to understand. Like I went to do my driver theory exam, like to get the provisional license, and by some fucking stroke of genius I somehow managed to sign up to do the test in Irish, which wasn't really my plan, because I just wanted to pass it. Like I was like, maybe I'll give it a crack, but I went in and I was like, look, I want to do this in English, and they said we can't switch it for you. It's like, pure bureaucracy, give us another 45 quid and then we'll consider it.
Classic.
But yeah, no joy getting the English test, so I went in and did it in Irish. I got 29 out of 30, which I was actually kind of happy with, that I could still understand. But like the words and the terminology used in the exam were like words I'd never seen or heard in my life, because
Naturally, like,
when you're doing it in English, you're learning new words that you've never heard before, and it's like no one talks about 3-point turns and all these whatever.
No.
Driving terminology is not something we learnt in school. So like all of the language in that exam was completely foreign to me. So I could say I'm fluent on one hand, in the sense that I can have a conversation about anything that I want, and I'd feel comfortable in that, with Dublin Irish. But at the same time, you could present me with that exam full of words that I'm completely unfamiliar with and never seen before.
if it's any consolation, man, like, I've been sitting in cars my whole life, and then when I actually first got on the road with a car, I had to text someone before. I'd go, which lane am I actually supposed to be driving? And I was driving on back roads, so it didn't make a difference. But like, I actually was driving on the wrong side the whole way to where I drove to, and no one said anything to me. Like, no one pulled up and beeped at me. Like, people just drove past me, like, whatever, like. And then it wasn't until I got home I texted one of the lads. He's like, yeah, you were driving on the wrong side of the road for like 20 minutes. I was like, fuck. It's like, no one said anything to me, so I didn't know.
Where are you actually from, man, actually?
I'm from Barna, originally in Galway. It's the very edge of Connemara, if you don't know it, on like the town side. Like, now it wouldn't be fluent speaking picturesque Connemara anymore like it was back in the day. It's quite built up now, and it's a lot of the people that move in seem to be very well off. Like,
yeah.
I lived there for 20. I lived in Knocknacarra, which is the town over, for about a year, and I moved here. I've been living here for about 25 years now. But I lived in Limerick and Clare there for a couple of years as well.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, when I was in college. But I've basically been in the same house most of my life.
There seemed to be like a Limerick connection with kind of the stuff that you were working on.
Yeah, like that's that. Like, I don't really work. There's not really a whole lot of rappers in Galway, and even though there is a few,
there never
but like,
really has been. I've always wondered about that.
Everyone's making different stuff in Galway, so there's not really much of a kind of connection there. Whereas all the boys that I'm working with in Limerick, and there's guys from Clare there's guys from Kerry and Cork, they're all kind of making music that the music I listen to. They're all roughly my age, and we all have the same kind of interests and stuff. Whereas in Galway, it's more like we're all completely different ages, and we're all into completely different genres. So collaborating, I wouldn't want to force it. Like, my initial intention was, when I finished college, was to build up the scene in Galway, because the scene in Limerick was established and I was part of it and all that, but I kind of wanted to establish it back home. But then obviously COVID hit, and that turned things on its head. And as well, just before then as well, I was asked to join up with Bad Arts, which was primarily based in Limerick, and I was like, fuck it, it's like, I get to be a part of this label with a load of really talented guys, or go back to Galway and maybe completely fail. So I said, fuck it, I'll stick with this. And I've been with them ever since now, for about a year and a half now. And it's been a very successful venture as far as I'm concerned. We've made a lot of great music, made a bit of money with the Bandcamp, and just been relatively successful, considering that our whole existence has been throughout lockdowns and shit like that, so you never got to do gigs or anything like that, and it's kind of, just the people in general don't have as much money to kind of pay for production and all that sort of stuff. So considering the issues we're facing, I think we've done exceptionally well, especially because we're only just starting out too. Like,
yeah, it is quite interesting, the kind of the new generation of artists that are emerging, like, during all this fucking nonsense going on, like, but still kind of hammering on. Like, it's tough. It's very tough to do, when you're living in, like, during the lockdown. I think it's when you actually have all this spare time and you're not working is the ideal time to be getting creative. But
I got loads done, like.
And now that I've fucking gone back to work, barely even full time, I'm only in 3 or 4 days a week, but you just, I don't know what it is. It's just very hard to find spare time to do anything, because when you don't work alone, like, at the minute I'm doing the majority of my production with Johnny Welfare. Like, we're kind of all focusing on solo ventures now, in the Róg area, and Johnny Welfare is kind of like my main man at the helm, for all production and stuff like that,
Yeah.
And like, I could record stuff at home, but I'm just never as happy with it when I'm, just recording something in the bedroom by myself. It's always great to have that engineer kind of person there with you to help you, but now that he's working full time and I'm kind of working semi full time, like I'm still doing 40 hours a week, just in small blocks. But to find a single time that we're both free is very difficult. And then there might be one day we're free for like for a few hours, and you know, I'm living out in like the Crumlin area, he's living in Dunleary, so just the journey it would take to go and see each other is loads. And you know, what used to be, you know, we'd be meeting up 2 times a week to at least once a week to 2 times a week in the past. Now, you know, we barely get to work on anything, you know, once a month. So it's really slowed down with working life getting in the way. And it's just, I think there's a massive problem in Ireland, is that it strangles creativity. It really doesn't nourish people to be creative whatsoever.
Definitely.
Like, there's fuck all supports for us. Like, we had a studio in East Wall, and it was great. Like, we were paying 500 a month between us, and that was grand. But then with all the, you know, with restrictions opening up, with restrictions being eased and everyone getting back to work, none of us really had the time to go and use the studio as much as we wanted to, apart from myself and Tim, and Tim being Johnny Welfare. And we just kind of, the other lads had to back out of paying, you know, X amount of the rent every month because they just couldn't afford it. And it's just a shame that, you know, there's so much potential art out there in the country, but the artists don't really have the opportunity to make it because there's just no facilities provided whatsoever. And I'm just seeing this more and more. Like, other artists that I follow on Instagram have started like putting the word out, like, where can I find studio space? There's anywhere I can use for studio space, and there's just nothing out there. And you know, that's not, I doubt there's one single person in Dáil Éireann who's even thought about this or gives a shit about this. Do you know what I mean? It's so far down the list of priorities. It's
shot down, you know.
It's disheartening to see that there's just, you know, they have,
you need to make Crow Park bigger, like.
Exactly. And you know, the grants were great for some, but like, you know, it takes a few days to even apply for a grant, and then even after that, nothing's guaranteed. And it shouldn't just be that, you know, some board somewhere says, all right, this musician's going to get the opportunity to do something, this musician isn't. Like,
exactly.
It needs
I heard about that grant. I was like, how is this new one that's kind of been coming out? I was like, how is that going to be selected? Like, it's not just going to be everyone who makes fucking beats in their room is going to get it. Like, it's going to be basically a very selective few. Like, who are you? I don't know any of them personally who got these grants. Like, you know what I mean? So I don't see myself getting it either.
And no shade on those who did receive the grants. Like,
no,
all power to them.
Blame,
but like, of course, but like, there's some people I've seen got 7 or 8 different grants. Do you know what I mean? Kind of.
Yeah, that's.
There's a lot of artists who say, let's tick the boxes of what they want the, you know, the music scene to be, and
100%.
It's all kind of following a trend, you know, rather than, you know, creating something unique or individual. Oh no, in fairness, we did get a few, you know, kind of government bursaries through doing gigs in September and August and June and stuff, or July. Like, we had basically the Dunleary County Council got like a load of money from the Realtus to run like outdoor gigs in Dunleary outside the library in Moran Park. And it was basically like, you know, they were paying a lot to kind of put some money back in the hands of the artists who didn't really get the opportunity to earn anything from during the restrictions. Like, so we got a good, you know, we got like 4 shows for the label. Like, I did a solo show, me and Fev did a show, Bazzy did a show, and then the Róg Poets did a show, and we were paid very handsomely, and I'd say fair play to them for giving us that opportunity.
Sweet.
And then
Doesn't
again,
come too often.
Yeah, exactly. And then again, the Lighthouse Dunleary, which is run by Body Tonic, shout out to Body Tonic, they've always been very good to us. They got a big bursary from the government to put on local gigs for the area, like a shitload of money. And that was basically to kind of, you know, same thing again, put money back in the hands of artists. So we got paid very handsomely for that gig as well. Probably a lot more than we'll ever get paid for a gig for a long time again. Like,
Hopefully not, like.
Well, no, yeah, but like, do you know what I mean? It was well more than what our fee is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. You wouldn't say no to it though.
Oh no, and you know, it's definitely made the fee more, perhaps. But yeah, it was great. That was great. Like, but still, something needs to be done for creative space, because there is no creative space at the minute. For, you know. And it's not just musicians. Like, I know loads of people. I went to IDT, like, you know, one of the leading art schools in the country, and, you know, tons of the people I went to college with, they're all in the kind of visual, creative arts kind of stuff, whether they're into clothes or painting or all sorts of, you know, I'm not really that artsy, so I can't really describe it, but, you know, doing stuff. And they're all struggling to find places to do their art, like, do you know what I mean? You go on sessions in these gaffs, and, you know, it's actually pretty cool. Like, they're very artsy gaffs, and the places look mad, but there's just piles of shite everywhere, because they're really short on space, and they could really use the space, just like we could. And I just wish there was some incentive out there to, you know, take over a building and repurpose it for, you know, local musicians and local artists and, you know, people who want to get creative.
A good example would be the Fifth Element place up in Belfast. Now I know they're in a new spot now. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. They had another place. I'm not too familiar now with the geography of Belfast, but it was in Belfast City, alright. And it's about like a 5-story building, and like they've got a studio in there, they've got a breakdancing spot, they've got the whole thing was coated in graffiti, like, you know, so basically graffiti classes, basically any sort of thing you wanted to do, you could put on gigs there. Like, I've been there a couple of times. It was fucking, like, this was the greatest thing I'd ever been in. Like, it was a top-notch, really nice fucking place, and it was all dedicated to basically hip-hop and music, like. And I know they've moved to a new place since for whatever reason, and it seems just as nice, like. But like something like that, I would have killed to have that opportunity when I was a kid, because there's lots of kids going in there and teenagers and shit like that. I'm not sure about the situation with COVID, but I was there pre-COVID, like I mean, if every city had one of those, like, I'm sure they'd fill the place to the brim, like. And while it's his dad was the guy that kind of ran it, Daryl Forsyth, he's a DJ, rapper, producer, does all sorts up in Belfast. While he was doing for more the kind of charitable sense, and it wasn't just like some profitable thing, it was like, if you wanted to make a bit of money, you could, within reason, by running a place like that, you know what I mean? I'm sure people would pay a decent bit of money just to even keep the place running and add new things like that. If, you know, I think it would be a bit unfair to, exactly what you're talking about, is not have extortionate places pretty much. If the only spots that are kind of available tend to be, you're going to be paying out your ass for it, like.
And they won't even be that good.
Exactly.
But no, man, that sounds unreal. Like, what you described there, like that play, I never actually had the opportunity to go up myself, but it sounds, you know, that is exactly what we need.
I was blown away by it, man. I was genuinely like, this is, it wasn't just, you know, a dilapidated building. Like, this was a nice building, if that's the way you want to describe it. Like, you know, it could have been a fucking hotel for all I know, like, but and just looked really, really well. And I'll say, like, I've got clips, and because I did actually, when I did that Irish hip hop documentary for my last year at college in 2019, I think it was, or 20, I went up there and interviewed Daz and a few other lads, like, and got loads of footage up there. Like, that's probably some of the latest footage you can get of the place as it was, like. And just like the graffiti up down the walls the whole way to the top of the building, really, it just fucking looks beautiful, like. Really, really, really nice looking place. It's a pity that they lost it, but as I said, they got a new spot, so they're still keeping on. But something like that, 100%, man. Like, if you had one or two, like maybe 2 or 3 in Dublin, because it's so big, but like, give one to Limerick and Galway.
Like. There'd be one needed in, say, definitely somewhere in the north side, like around Ballymun and Finglas would be perfect. One out here in the Crumlin area would be unreal, because the D12 music scene is really starting to pop off. There's a lot of names coming out of, you know, this neighbourhood. Like, I'm from Dún Laoghaire myself, but I've just moved out this direction in the last year. And sure, we probably could use one in Dún Laoghaire too. But it's fucking, yeah, like there actually is nothing. And all the community centres now have all been shut down as well. And it's kind of, it's creating another problem where you've got a lot of misdirected youth now, especially in Dublin. And I don't know if you've seen the videos or been out in Dublin City recently.
Oh yeah, I haven't been there, but I've seen it. Fuck that, like,
there's
Galway is packed enough, like.
But they're all kids. They're all less than 18 years old.
Nothing to do, like.
Exactly. They've been shut down and locked out for ages, and then along comes the fucking pandemic, and they've just been basically told no one gives a shit about them, and they're just going into town and fucking venting their frustration. Like,
picture it yourself, like if when like 16 to 18, like they're probably the best years of your life in a sense. You're finally kind of getting your freedoms a little bit, and you're going out drinking, meeting girls, and doing all that shit. Like, having that whole period of your life just gone, basically, or not spent the way you wanted to. I imagine a lot of kids are going fucking gaga and getting frustrated and shit like that. So I mean, it's annoying enough as a 25-year-old to have to go through this, but like, we're kind of past all that. Like, I wasn't really interested in being in fucking crowds of 600 people in fucking Air Square or Sparch. Like, I was trying to avoid that. Like, but if I was their age, I would have been fucking going bananas and enjoying the fucking shit out of it. Like,
yeah, like I was quite an angry 16-year-old, you know what I mean? So I can only imagine how bad I would have handled this if I was that age. Like. But yeah, like that, and they're just, it's not, I'm not going to say it's not their fault, you know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't be going around smashing the shit out of the city, but
no, this
problem wasn't created by them, and they're just, what their actions is just a reaction to this new problem. And this is why we had fucking community centres in the first place. This is why we had stuff like this, but they've all been shut down. The government doesn't want to fund them. Privatise everything and tell everyone else to fuck off. Like,
in my experience, they were always closed pre-COVID too, man. Like, I lived in the country. So
that's what I mean. Like, they were all been like they've all been shut down, not because of the pandemic. They've been shut down because of fucking greed and lack of funding, and no one giving a fuck about them.
Yeah, because there's a few estates that my mates would have grown up in the town over Knocknacarra, like, and there was always community centres in their estates, like, and there's never anyone in there or anything like going on. I'm like, what the fuck is that place actually? Like, what is it? It just sits there in the middle of the place and it's just never doing anything. It's like, oh, it's a community centre, like, and like, yeah, it's kind of like, I don't think I've actually ever heard anyone talk about what they've done in the community centre, because it's just like a pretty much a dead thing now, like, and it was there for a fucking reason, because it was needed, like, especially in condensed kind of urban areas. Like, there's a lack of infrastructure in a lot of cases like that, so it seems pretty ridiculous. That's the one thing that they don't bother keep it running. Like,
the nearest one to me when I was growing up was in Monkstown Farm, and never went to it or got to go to it. And my mate, or sure, I know if you know of him, Ja Wool, he lives there, like, overlooking it. He can see it from his bedroom window, and now it's just sitting there derelict, basically being used by lads to go and drink cans in and light fires and basically,
as you do.
Exactly, yeah.
Not judging, like, did the same shit myself, like, but
no, exactly.
It's nothing wrong with acknowledging there's a bad side to it too. Like, you could have spent your time a bit better.
Cans and lighting fires. I still do it now, like.
yeah, just a bit more safely. I don't just throw a petrol can in and barbecue fluid, set something on fire, and go, oh shit, man, that might actually burn down. Like,
yeah, I usually get a bit into nature before I start lighting fires. But then again,
wood and cardboard, and I guess if you're really struggling, a little bit of plastic is it won't kill the entire planet.
Well, it's a good way to get it going.
True. When it's fucking pissing rain, so like, I was bringing a lot of the lads out to like Barna Woods, like, to set up fires and shit like that, and just fucking drink cans to kind of start a lockdown and stuff like that. And I was amazed how many people didn't know how to like fucking make a fire, like. But a lot of the stuff would be damp as fuck, so yeah, a little bit of plastic to get it going, and eventually then, like, after maybe an hour of constantly lighting everything up, it does become a roaring fire, like. But even little things like, one of the lads goes, "Did any of you bring wood?" And I'm like, man, we're in a fucking woods, like, what do you mean? And I go get some wood there, like, while I set this up. And one of the lads goes for like a baby tree and starts pulling it out of the ground. I'm like, man, Jesus, you grew up in West Side, like, not fucking, New York for 50 years, like, surely, like. I was like, there's wood all over the entire ground that's fucking class for lighting fires and stuff like that. Use that. And I've been there before, seeing lads going in with buying fucking stacks of firewood from the fucking petrol station down the road. Like, I'm like, you're lads, you don't bring salt water to the beach, like, or you don't bring sand. You don't bring sand to the beach. It's there, like.
Yeah.
Bit of fucking. I don't know.
I've a saying that, like, I'll never give up on a fire. Like, when you're out and you're trying to light a fire and it's just not going. You have to keep. Just don't give up, do you know what I mean? I've never been able to, like, even if it's taken half an hour and they're like, lads, this isn't happening, I'm like, nah, trust me, I can't leave until I get this fire going. It almost like I'll be fucking. It'll hurt me inside if I'm not able to do this. Like,
once you've spent enough time frustratingly doing something, it's kind of like you're gonna feel shittier afterward if you just fucking gave up when you're sitting in the cold and the wet outside drinking cans or something like that. But once it's going,
it's like going for a swim and then bitching out before you get in the water.
Yeah,
because it's too cold. It's like you've motivated yourself to do something and then you're turning around and saying to yourself you can't do it. It's probably, you know, for your own psychology, it's probably not a great thing. That's why you always have to. My mom always says, like, you'll never regret a swim, even no matter how fucking shit you feel about it and how much you really don't want to get in the water. Like, you'll never regret it in the end of the day.
One of the last ones I had, now I can say I quite regretted it, because we'd been swimming throughout the fucking massive heat wave we'd had here. I imagine it was quite the same up in Dublin, like, and this was the first day. It just wasn't the same. It was quite cold and windy, and actually, hang on a sec, I have to close the window here, it's lashing rain.
There's a bit of borscht out here as well.
Anyways, went swimming. It was fucking blustering wind. Like, I was already freezing before I got in the water. Like, got in, like, and Jesus Christ, man. Like, I have bad circulation, so like once I actually got out, like, I didn't get feeling in my fucking hands or toes, like, probably till I was home about 2 hours later, like, proper feeling, like. And it was kind of a sad moment, because before that we were going swimming every day. It was the first time we'd really taken advantage of it, because it was fucking just such a great summer, like. I know when it's time to call it quits with the out swimming. Like, for me, like, I can't take the risk, because like, I love swimming in the summer, but once it does get too cold, it is too cold, and I just know that it's not time for me to get in. Like, when you see old men going down to Black Rock, man, in their 60s and 70s, swimming in this in the weather we're having right now, you're like, what the fuck, man?
They're a different breed. Like,
some old people fucking die after breaking their ankle stepping over a curb, and these old lads are getting into fucking, you know, Baltic fucking waters, going for a fucking swim. It's like, man, I couldn't even swim that far. Like, I'd drown.
I never saw the appeal of winter swimming, but like,
they just don't have PlayStations, man. That's just it. Like,
yeah, there's a tradition of swimming in the 40 foot on Christmas Day that everyone goes and does. I would not be into it at all. Now, I tried it once, and I like, my hands were, my body froze up so much that I actually physically couldn't move. Like, I couldn't tread water or anything. I was literally drowning. My dad had to jump in and like pull me out of the water. Yeah. And that's when I learned that, like, my body just can't handle the winter cold of the water. So I just can't. I just don't get in. I know I could possibly drown.
Yeah, I wouldn't be the greatest swimmer. Like, I can swim fine, but like, yeah, I wouldn't be the kind of guy who's like, I'm gonna swim up to that fucking buoy there, fucking 100 meters out. Like, I'd like to be near land or fucking rock, whether I'm over my head or not. Like, but
yeah, for me, it's just more a question of fitness. I wouldn't want to put trust of my ability to keep myself going. Like, my dad goes swimming the 40 foot all the time, and he swims out, you know, miles out to the boys, like. And I've gone with him before, and I just get fucking knackered straight away. Like, I don't.
Oh yeah.
You know, I'm not as active as I'd like to be. So, you know, my fitness isn't, you know, that, like, in fairness to my dad, he swims every day and he goes cycling and he does this and he does that. Like, he's quite fit for a man of his age. Like, quite embarrassing that, you know, the younger man of the family isn't as fit as the eldest. But
same in my house as well. My old lad's man into climbing and fucking hiking and all that shit.
I think that's just what happens, though.
Still run faster than him, though.
I think that's just what happens, though, when you get into, you know, the middle age. Like, I think that's what all the dads be doing. Like, they love going off cycling and fucking swimming, and
because they know on one level they may not be able to do it in, you know, 10-15 years, or as well they don't want to be. It'll work out a bit better for you if you're quite fit at that age. When you get a bit older, you won't be as slow and as brittle, like.
Well, yeah, so definitely. Like, no, I should.
Its benefits, like.
I always tell myself I need to fucking, you know, start doing a bit more exercise, just for a bit of longevity, like, you know, live longer.
Yeah.
All that kind of crack.
I walk everywhere, for the most part.
Yeah,
that's something, like.
I am a big walker, and I do cycle everywhere, as often as I can. A lot of my social life is based out in Dublin. Ever since I moved out to D12, like, it's it's a lot harder to get out to see people as much as I used to. But it's still grand. Like I'll jump on the bike. It's about 45-minute cycle to Dunleary, but it's a fucking tough one. It's like 17 kilometers, so it's great crack, cycling out there at the start of the day. But inevitably, it's always for a bit of drinking or a bit of crack. And,
Exactly. Yeah.
I end up getting fucking way too hammered. I have no control over myself when I drink whatsoever. Like, no, it's not that I can't control how I act, but I just can't control the volume that I consume.
I'd be saying 4 beers leads to 8. Like, but I mean,
8 beers.
I guess as long as you're not blackout, man.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I don't black out, but I often cycle home far too drunk than I should. I hope my ma
I
isn't
do that
listening
often
to this
in my
now,
walk.
but like I've fallen off my bike 5 times since I moved into the area, cycling home pissed, and it's fuck it, like I wear a helmet now, so that's my kind of safety net. But it's a tough cycle when you're absolutely hammered. Like, you don't have any fitness at all when you're drunk. You get very, very tired.
No.
And it's just absolute torture. And every time I do it, I'm just like, why do I keep doing this to myself? I'm a cheap bastard though. I'll never get a taxi. I fucking hate getting for taxi, especially if I'm by myself. I'm just like, do anything I can to avoid getting a taxi.
Yeah, it is pricey. Like, last gasp, I'll get a taxi by myself. Like, I mean, with walking, like, I'd have to walk from Galway City to Barna and back sometimes. Like, if it's too late to get the bus, or the bus isn't working in my schedule or whatever. Like, and
how long would that take?
Above, if it's from mine to town, it's probably about an hour, maybe a little bit longer. But I walk quite fast, so I might even get it in just under an hour, to be honest.
That's not too
I
bad.
haven't timed it in a while.
So that's what,
But,
like 7 kilometers or something.
It'd be, I know it's from here to a place called Miller's Lane. It's like 8 kilometers, so it'd be about twice that, I'd say. So about 15, 16 kilometers, maybe a bit more. I'm not sure.
Jeez, well, to do that in an hour would be serious work, because I used to walk to work every day, and that was 5 kilometers, and that took me 45 minutes.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, I'd say, like, as I said, it's been a while since I've timed it, and usually as well when I'm doing it, I'm stopping off and then walking a bit more further and stopping off, grabbing something here, grabbing something there, that kind of thing. So like, that would be added on too, so it'd be hard to kind of clock it. But I don't mind doing that as long as it's like basically not the weather I'm looking outside at, where it's just pissing rain and the wind is just fucking blowing in your face. That makes it miserable. Like, but any other way, I just don't give a shit. I'm happily enjoying myself, fucking strolling about the place. Like, headphones with music are a great bonus. Like, and it gives you a lot of time to think as well. To be honest, I actually might, like, I never did it for any therapeutic reasons, but I imagine walking for hours on end around the place by myself, just listening to music and thinking about stuff, allows me to kind of, I guess, even just kind of really broaden out, like, maybe a problem or something I want to do, and kind of analyze it bit by bit by bit. Because, like, generally whenever I'm not doing that, I'm quite occupied mentally with something else. So I have that space of time to actually do nothing and don't fucking have Wi-Fi on my phone as well or anything like that. It could probably be therapeutic, and as well to come up with music projects, and that's how I've come up with the names of most of my fucking albums and songs. And
yeah, no, to be honest, I'd be the same. It's a lot of walking around and thinking. Like, I can never actually sit down to have an idea. I always have ideas when I'm like in that kind of time space. Like, I had plenty of time when I was trekking through the Himalayas, literally just before the lockdown happened. I went.
What was that like?
Oh, it was absolutely class. Like, I went to Nepal, did a week of trekking around the Annapurna circuit, and like, I was by myself. They say that you're supposed to bring a guide to guide you through the Himalayas and that, and whatever. But I was like, nah, fuck it. Like, I'll be grand. I'll just follow the trail, stay safe, whatever.
Brave, like.
No, like, it was fine. Like, I didn't see. I think they just say that for insurance or security, or like,
or you have to pay them.
Yeah, but maybe it's also just because there's a load of fucking idiots out there who wouldn't really know how to handle themselves. But I've been out in nature long enough.
I'd imagine there'd be a lot of those.
Yeah, like, don't poke the snake with a stick. Don't go, like, where I was, it was like, like, nature probably won't hurt you because they know to stay away from the trails where humans go.
Tends to be the case, like,
unless they're really desperate.
Yeah.
If I did get attacked by a bear or a whatever feline predators they have up there, like, I would have been fucked. But Luckily, nothing like that happened. But it was dead cool. Like, just spent a week by myself, you know, walking through these mad towns where they don't even have access to roads. Like, do you know what I mean? To get there, you have to walk. Like, if you break an ankle, you know, you're in trouble. I'd say that's probably more the biggest risk, is like falling down a cliff or like hurting yourself physically. Like, at some stages I'd be walking across paths which were literally only the width of a human, and if you were to fall off them, you know, you're done.
Fuck.
And I realised after that I was actually on the wrong one. I kind of started walking up this really, really skinny goat trail, and if it's one thing being on a goat trail, it's having a 10 kilo bag on your back kind of throws off your balance a lot. And as I got to, you know, turn the goat trail a bit, it just disappeared. It just wasn't there anymore. So I had to awkwardly turn around and shuffle all the way back. And that's when I realised I was actually meant to be walking through the centre of the gorge, not along the rim of it. Because I just noticed, like, a load of tourists with a guide, but not below me, like, walking along the kind of riverbed. I was like, so you just have to get your feet wet, like.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that was fairly sketch, but great buzz all the same. Especially, like, being around all, like, it was effectively Tibet. Like, it's not officially like China, you know, or, well, not China, but, you know, the state of Tibet. It's like, it's part of the state of Nepal, but it is the Tibetan plateau, so it's just.
I'll have to bleep that out, man.
Maybe, but it's just a part of it's the part of big respect to the Communist Party, in case you're listening.
me too, yeah, all that stuff, yeah.
But yeah, it was cool kind of being in like Tibetan villages and civilizations, especially where they, like, in the Nepalese side of it, they have, you know, complete kind of autonomy and the freedom to be who they want to be. And like, it was quite sad. A lot of them, you know, when you get talking to them, they just tell you about how much they miss their homeland. And a lot of the civilizations that they live in there are kind of like they're like refugee camps that just never ended. Do you know what I mean? Like, most refugee camps are kind of like a short-term solution before the refugees find somewhere to be. But, you know, because they're still in the Tibetan plateau, kind of near their home, the refugee camps just got turned into like, you know, like small civilizations and stuff. So what was tents became huts, and that's just where they live now. So you do get a lot of, you know, kind of, you get to talk, if you ever wanted to talk to, you know, Tibetans about what the story is and what it's like, you know, along the mountains of Nepal is the best place to find them. So
there's a Scorsese movie, Kundun or Kundun. It's one. It's like, it's a pure obscure one that, like, no one, like, it's like right smack in the middle of, like, just after, like, Goodfellas, and, like, you know, he's got so many other movies that are so famous. No one's actually really. I've never met anyone else who's seen it, but it's based around just before they were expelled, basically, and the Dalai Lama had to leave. It's about, like, the young Dalai Lama at the time. Well, he's still the same Dalai Lama, actually, but it's about him, and it's completely in. I assume is Tibetan. Is Tibetan a language?
It is, yeah. Tibetan's
so
Tibetan be like the OG language of Asia. So, like, Chinese is it's the Sino-Tibetan language family. But Tibetan was the old school one. Like, they've been around longer than, you know, a lot of people. But, like, Sino-Tibetan languages would be like Chinese, Vietnamese. I don't know if Korean is. Mongolian, I'm not sure of either. No, Mongolian is Mongolic. But yeah, there's, like, a good few languages around there that are Sino-Tibetan, and they come from, like, the OG Tibetan language, which is probably like the it's kind of like the Latin of that region. Do you know what I mean? The language that all the other ones stem from.
Yeah.
And it's also the home of, I think, it's kind of mainly where Buddhism comes from, although Buddha was born in Nepal. But yeah, I suppose at the time Nepal didn't really exist in the way that it did. It's kind of only existed in the last 1500 years, and back then when Buddha was born, it was probably all part of the kingdom of Tibet. Like, it's an interesting argument, because, like, on one hand, yeah, like, Tibet, you know, deserves its freedom, but like all, you know, Buddhism and kind of shamanism and, you know, nice spiritual things that seem nice to us aside, like it still was a feudal kingdom that had slaves and it had this and that, like, do you know what I mean? Like the same way that all kind of old empires and civilizations existed, like they were all kind of built on the suffering of some people. So it's kind of, I think it's easy for people to go, you know, free Tibet. Like I still believe, you know, in free Tibet, but like they did have feudalism even just when the Chinese invaded and took freedom away from the state. They were still living in like ancient feudalism, like, you know, like a monarchy, and still had slaves and all this kind of stuff. So it is a double-edged sword, but, you know, still in the end of the day, I believe any group of people should have the right to self-determination and their own state and their own people, especially... You can't
prosecute the people that are the ancestors of the people that were doing all that stuff back then, do you know what I mean? They should be allowed to live a good quality of life despite their ancestors' fucking actions 600 years ago, do you know what I mean? Yeah,
and like just the right to self-determination, you know, they speak their own language, they have their own faith, they have their own everything, do you know what I mean? You know, let them away with it, do you know what I mean? I don't believe in any form of imperialism. Like, I'd be quite socialist in my beliefs, but I still kind of disagree with a lot of like China's practices. Like, fair play to them. On paper, China is probably one of the most successful countries in history, if not the most successful, when you look at the fact that they elevated, you know, 99% of their population out of poverty, taught them all literacy. Like, the expansion and the growth of the country in such a short space of time has never been achieved by any state. They got
a nasty bollocking in World War II as well, like, so they
did,
came out from that pretty good.
And, you know, they had a tough time of it. They were kind of, you know, at the boot of the heel of many colonizers and oppressors for many years, and they're kind of, you know, turning around on that, but still all this kind of surveillance state stuff, and, you know, generally like not giving you know, Tibet or the kind of East Turkestan areas, you know, the right to be independent is just something I'll never agree with, especially from, you know, an Irish Republican background.
Of course,
you know, we always believe in, you know, people being allowed to have their own country, like like my friend was arguing with me recently. He's like, well, imagine if Britain turned into a big massive kind of socialist utopia and Ireland had the opportunity to join. I was like, you know, you can get rid of all the problems in our country and everyone will be grand, you know, house prices will be fine, you know, we'll all, you know, live a lot better. It's like, would you do that? I was like, nah, not if it's with the Brits, do you know what I mean? Like, no. Even if it means better life for everyone, I still, you know, the inner Rahman inside me could never let me be part of that union again in any
Jack
form.
Has no place in this country.
Exactly. Even if it's a union hammer and sickle, I still wouldn't go for it.
I would recommend the Scorsese film was about I can't remember how it's pronounced, Kundun or Kundun. It's definitely not like it's not Taxi Driver, Goodfellas, Raging Bull tier, and it is quite it's a realistic historical depiction. So it's like, it is just, you know, the Dalai Lama's life wasn't that insane or chaotic. Like, he's not doing all the things you're going to see in all the other famous Scorsese films. But if you're just, it's a solid movie overall, and it's interesting just to kind of see that part of history. No, definitely check it out, because I wasn't too aware of how that went down, and I didn't know that the Dalai Lama didn't actually live there anymore.
Yeah, he lives in Dharamshala now in North India.
It's mad. Like, this is set in like this came about like in roughly the 30s or 40s, I think. It was not, and like, it's still, and I looked it up, and it's like, it's still the current Dalai Lama. I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it has, like, so there's this other movie, 7 Years in Tibet, with Brad Pitt, and it's actually really good. It's kind
don't think I've heard of that.
It's very Hollywoody, but it's you know, it's a good watch. It's basically himself and I don't know the name of the actor, but he plays Professor Lupin in Harry Potter.
I know the guy, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't know his name though.
So it's him and Brad Pitt, and they're two Austrian mountaineers who get caught up in kind of the fallout of World War II. So basically, he's sent to conquer quote unquote, Mount Everest, and their expedition gets stopped by the British Army halfway up somewhere in Nepal, and because like Britain has just declared war on Germany, all these lads have been taken into like a prison camp, but they're saying like, look, we're Austrian, we're not Germans, we've nothing to do with this war or whatever, whatever it was. Like Germany and Austria were part of the same state at that time, so they did end up taking them as like, they weren't even soldiers, you know what I mean, they were just lads trying to climb a mountain. But they got taken into a prison camp anyway. They spend a few years in the prison camp, multiple escape attempts, and then they eventually do get away, and they make it up to, like, they trek through the mountains for days and days on end, and eventually find themselves in Lhasa, which is the capital of Tibet. And your man, the mountaineer, like, befriends the Dalai Lama as a young boy, and it's just kind of, the rest of the movie is just them, like, living in Tibet amongst the Tibetans and having a grand old time of it. Like,
but it's a true story.
It is a true story, yeah. It's a good watch. Like, your man wrote a book about it, and they stayed friends up until the 90s or something, when the mountaineer died.
Yeah, I think that I because it's been a while since I've seen the Scorsese film. I think that that character, because I was thinking of there, like, do I remember that guy being in the film at all? I was like, I do think at some point he's not like a fucking a main character or even a supporting character. He kind of just shows up briefly or whatever, but he gives the Dalai Lama a lot of like maps and kind of Western kind of
that's exactly what it was,
and literature and stuff. That probably was him. Now thinking back, like, yeah,
because in the other film, your man is like, because Tibet is at this time completely shut off from the world, like they live completely, as traditionally as they always had. They had no modern technology whatsoever. Everything was, old school, and they didn't really know much about the world at all. So the Dalai Lama was, a curious young lad. He was like, teach me about all these places, teach me, other languages, teach me this, teach me that. And he kind of took him in as a a teacher. Like, I think no one actually wanted him around. But it was just the Dalai Lama who actually was said.
I'd imagine so. He'd corrupt the mind, so they might say.
Exactly, yeah. Because
teaching him about the Western world, like,
because Tibet wouldn't let people in. They were shut off from the world. They didn't want visitors coming. They didn't want people like living amongst them. They wanted to stay, completely ethnically pure Tibetan. So like no one was really welcome or granted entry into Tibet. Apart from very specific reasons. So when they got there, they had to really fight for their right to stay there. But yeah, no, it's definitely, I definitely need to check out the one, because like there's one thing that was just like kind of Hollywood classic, do you know what I mean? Like where the narrative and the soundtrack is always so predictable, whereas like I'd love to see a Scorsese take on like the whole
this
scenario.
May as well have been made by a guy from Tibet. Like, it wasn't just like, it seems like it was a very weird choice, considering his movies up until then, they were all kind of very extravagant usually, and based on kind of more grounded things, you know what I mean? I don't think he'd really done any kind of historical movies bar The Last Temptation of Christ, but I mean, that's not, fucking 100% real history, and it was more of like a psychological take on Christ, where he it's basically about Jesus and him choosing between living a normal life and how his life would have went if he chose not to be the Son of Christ.
Is that the one that people went mad about over here?
Maybe, because like there's like he like wanks in it, and like there's sex scenes and shit like that.
That's definitely the one. That's definitely the one where
it's trippy as fuck, man. Like, I've only seen it once, so I've vaguish. I saw it like maybe nearly a decade ago now, but I remember it just being like, now it probably wasn't that long ago, but like it's very just like, it's like Passion of Christ is decent. But this was like, I know this was like basically what the Passion of the Christ probably could have been overall. But it's because for me, the Passion, like, it's mainly famous for that torture scene, like where Jesus is getting whipped and all that. Like, it's a solid movie, but like this movie, it's Willem Dafoe plays Jesus in this one, and
that's gas.
I'd highly recommend it. That was another one. But getting back to the point, like, Scorsese hadn't really done any movies like this at all, so it was kind of strange. And like I think it had like maybe a $20 million budget or whatever, and it fucking got like nothing back at the box office because no one was interested in watching this movie. Like, they were expecting, you know, if he was going to do if it was going to be a Scorsese movie set in Asia, they would have assumed it was like they're going to be based in the Yakuza or something like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
or
some
not
sort of crime
fucking
thing.
the Dalai Lama. So it's very grounded and very just kind of like, you know, it's not in any way a typical Scorsese flick. So
And
like,
is there any action at all involved? Like, do they kind of show the
it shows bits and pieces
Chinese?
of war and stuff like that, but for the most part it's just following the Dalai Lama around with his kind of day-to-day life, and like, it's interesting, but like, you know, as much as I like something that's kind of very realistic, there still has to be kind of a bit more action or kind of wild antics or something to kind of drag me in, like,
For me,
whereas
yeah.
this is just very, very kind of as real as it gets, basically, like, so they're not gonna throw in some just like silly comedy or big explosion or fucking sexy girl for no reason, because it would make no sense, like.
Yeah. Well, they'd be able to draw me in on Tibet alone. Do you know what I mean? I like, if it was
There
set
you go.
somewhere else, like if it was kind of, say, from a Christian perspective, like there's no chance I could watch some monk walking around a church somewhere in Europe for 2 hours. Like, I would lose interest
know.
very quickly. But
Just,
just
I'm sure they wouldn't show them doing their illicit activities either, like.
exactly. But just oh, well, I'd watch that. There's actually a great show on Netflix called Sabora. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, I haven't heard of it, no.
It's set in Rome, and it's basically about the Roman mafia, and it's quite mad because it's like very Game of Thrones in the way that they you know, there's all these different factions that have a part to play in how the underground of Rome works. Like, you've got the corruption at government level, but then of course, like in Rome, you've got the Vatican, and it's, you know, there's a lot of like Vatican corruption. You've got like the mafia, like there's tons of priests who just love having like drug fueled orgies and stuff, and the mafia be there like blackmailing them because they're taking videos of this happening and all, and then the government might blackmail an El Cardinal here and there, like, and it's all just one big shit show of mafia, government and Vatican all basically being criminals, you know, together. And it's like there's different factions of politicians and you know different mafias who have their own, you know, politicians and you know, members of the church and stuff, you know, because they say to drive politics in Rome, you kind of need endorsement from the church, like, do you know what I mean? Having religion on your side when you're trying to win Roman elections is a very important
Big
thing.
boost.
So the mafia's trying to, you know, influence people on both sides of that, and then of course the police are, you know, the corruption there as well. So it's all just one big fucking drug gun fueled
Sounds like
orgy.
something I'd like.
Yeah, no, it's really worth the watch. And then
Godfather 3 touched on a lot of those subjects, kind of a little bit.
it did, and then you've got the gypsies as well. Like, the gypsies have their own mafia, and then there's like the mafia who are like from Rome, and then there's the guys from the south who are like who everyone's scared of, and they're like trying to move in and just take over Rome as well. So there's tons of shit going on all the time. It's well worth the watch. There's like 3 seasons there and a movie.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely I'll check that out. It's not often I when I actually hear someone describe something from Netflix and I'm like, oh, I'll watch that, but that actually sounds like something I'd like.
Yeah, no, it's a whopper show.
Sound sure we're hitting the hour mark now. If you want to plug anything before we close up, any music or videos or stuff that you're bringing out soon,
Yeah, we kind of
fire away.
went off on a tangent there. Should we bring it back to music for a few minutes anyway? Like, well, I'm working on a documentary with T.G. Caher at the moment, which you should all keep an eye out for. It's basically going to be about I won't describe too much, but it's going to basically kind of revolve around the Irish language and kind of hip hop and the youth culture and the old ways of you know, bailidges and, you know, kind of bards and poetry and all the old ways of Ireland of storytelling and literature and stuff, and how like hip hop is kind of one of the main, you know, genres of music that's kind of leading the new revival of these traditions of the Irish language, and I suppose kind of modern poetry in English as well. And yeah, so that doc's coming out soon, and I'm working on a song with a Celtic musician called Carl Nesbitt. which is basically, it's going to be like a drill song. So we've got the skeleton of the beat there. We sent off, I got Bazzy's making pretty good drill beats at the minute, and he sent one off to Carl, and Carl laid down 5 or 6 different tracks over it with like Unfadog Fada, like the big flute, mandolin, bowron, like loads of really cool stuff.
That sounds cool.
That's going to be performed in Irish, and yeah, but most importantly, I have a new tune coming out quite soon. I haven't a release date yet, but the song is finished and ready to go. It's called Róg, and it's like really, really, really heavy banging trap. That's going to be also completely Os Gaeilge, and it's basically like, the idea around that song is to kind of, like I was saying earlier, like growing up, I didn't really have any Irish language hip hop to listen to, and I think it's kind of important that I create as much as I can, so that perhaps a future generation of Gaeilgeoirs can actually have, you know, a genre, not just one artist to listen to, but like a genre, a selection of artists to listen to rapping Os Gaeilge. And like this song is basically, it doesn't really, like usually when I write a song, it has a message and it's about something quite particular, whereas this one is kind of less direct. It's almost like freestyle type of flow.
I get you.
But it's kind of like, it's just to prove to the youth that the Irish language can be as, you know, exciting and loud and robust as a lot of the modern hip hop that's out there now. Like, it's you know, there's a kind of big problem, I think, with conservatism in the Gaeilge community, and a lot of reasons that kids kind of lose interest in learning the language is because they don't have anything cool about the language to know. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no, it's always very old, and it's always very kind of polite and stuff, and then you've just got, you know, a kind of a rejection of anything contemporary being embraced in the language. So everything needs to be all there's a certain sect of people who speak Gaeilge who want everything to be all traditional and stuff like this, and a lot of that seeps through into the education system and makes a lot of young people think like, oh, this is a boring thing, it's a boring language, like why would I be interested in this? So these kind of songs I'm working on, and Róg in particular, is kind of trying to fight that and show the youth them that, you know, it can be cool and fun and exciting and youthful and whatnot, and hopefully, you know, encourage them to start creating, you know, art Os Gaeilge themselves that, you know, pushes on a younger generation, because, you know, we have some out there now, but I think we could do it a lot more, and it would also be a great help to the revival of the language, you know, because every language needs its culture and its pop culture and, you know, its artistic culture, and I think we're lacking in that a lot at the moment. And if we had a revival in the music, I think you'd see a revival in the language, you know, in, you know, a lot of other areas as well.
I agree, especially when it's supposedly dying. Do you know what I mean? It needs some genuine revival. Like,
yeah, it needs to reinvent itself. And, you know, people don't need to, you know, speak it, you know, fluently like people from the west of Ireland. Like, you know, the day will probably come where, you know, that part of the language could eventually die out, but we could, you know, see a new hybrid of how we speak if we just included as many words as we can, you know, in our everyday life, even for those who don't speak the language but know the cúpla focal. I would just encourage everyone to use the cúpla focal, like never ask in a cafe for milk and sugar, always ask for banya and shukra. You know, just even when I'm working, like I work in the service industry, and I always use Irish, you know, in a context where I know that everyone's going to definitely understand what I'm going to say. I will always use the words that I know people will understand. Like,
everyone knows what a cup on tea is, like.
Exactly, like there's plenty words out there that everybody's familiar with, and, you know, they should just use them as often as they can, and, you know, just let as much of the language sneak into our way of speaking. Like, there's actually some cool instances out there of how Irish has kind of gotten into other languages and like, you know, influenced certain things. Like, so for example,
out in Jamaica,
Ganzi. Yeah, exactly. There's like, I don't know if you saw that video, but it's like some chap found like some like reggaeton or dancehall artist who was like spitting bars, and he's like talking about wearing his Ganzi.
Yeah.
And then out in South Africa, like shanty towns. The word shanty literally comes from shanty, old house.
I didn't know that one, no.
Yeah, because of something. I think it was Irish people in South Africa who introduced that word, and then the word shanty just kind of spread to all.
It'd be used in the Old West as well, like.
Yeah, absolutely. But shanty towns, you find them in South America, India, lots of Africa. But like, that's a word used to describe it. What's the other one also in South Africa is shebeen. Like, I'm sure. Do you know what a shebeen is?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, like, so in South Africa, in the kind of black areas, they would often, not be allowed into the city centres by the police. They'd just be stopped and turned around. And wouldn't have been allowed into pubs during apartheid. So they basically had to make their own bars, where just one house in the neighbourhood would just, take it upon themselves to renovate their house into a pub. And the word for that was a shebeen. I can't tell you right now, it's not on the top of my head why or how that happened, but it's certainly from the Irish language.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's other examples out there. I just can't think of them right now.
Some lad must have just met some Irish lad and spoke to him, and he must have just told him what a shebeen, his interpretation of a shebeen. So when they started making it, that fella was like, hey, that's a shebeen, I heard about this before. Could have been something as simple as that.
It could go back a while, because, at one stage, Ireland and South Africa were part of the same country. We were in the British Empire, and there probably was, don't quote me on this because I don't know if it's true or not, but there probably was Irish lads out in South Africa, not as the bad guys, but kind of in the suffering sense, because they
servants.
Yeah, South Africa had Indians and all sorts of people, all members of the British
Empire. That's how everyone got
Empire.
spread out so much, like.
Exactly, yeah. So there was probably a lot of Irish out there too who kind of influenced, in a positive way.
Yeah.
But yeah. And what else are we working on? Róg Poets has an album coming out soon. We don't know. We've been kind of sitting on it for a while. And we don't really know how to go about it because the algorithm of releasing stuff has changed massively at the minute. And like we put out a single there, Karpaki Part 2, which we were really, really proud with, and I don't think it's even gotten to 500 streams yet. And it's not that people have lost interest in us, because like the feedback we've actually got from our fan base has been more than it ever has been. Do you know what I mean? But it's just the ability to get your song heard is getting more and more difficult, and Instagram has pulled the arse out of natural promotion. Social media.
We spoke about this last night when I was talking to Don Shee. Like, this was like a half an hour long conversation about it. Like, it's very evident, and I think everyone's noticing. Like, it's fucked up.
Yeah, and basically all these, as a musician, it's like we're competing with some girl in North America doing some stupid fucking dance, and she's getting 2 or 3 million likes, and just, it's not even entertainment. It's like, it's just the most mindless fucking useless shite. And
it's sex sells though, because it's usually some gorgeous girl with big tits, like,
exactly, yeah. But it's like, they're kind of, it's almost a bit dystopian. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I totally agree, man.
They're fucking programming people to just be fucking thick and easily brainwashed, and it's easy to govern a world when all they want to do is just watch, the mindless fucking stupid.
You sound like an old man now.
Maybe I am, but have you ever seen...
No, I'm full agreement, man, with you there, like.
Have you ever seen that movie, Idiocracy?
I haven't, no.
Oh, man, you would really, really like this. I know you'd enjoy this. It's basically set in... it's your man from Lost. It's a cult classic. Like, it got shite reviews and loads of people hate it, but I love it, and there's loads of people who love it. It's a very smart film, like, but it's basically some guy, he's part of a military experiment where he gets frozen in a cryogenic chamber, and then a year later the program was completely abandoned and they just kind of fuck everything away. And then 500 years later, him and one other girl that were in the thing just get released into modern Earth, and it's basically
sounds like Demolition Man.
Yeah, but it's like look how stupid America is now. It's like imagine how stupid they would be in 500 years, and it's like Terry Crews is the president, and he's just going around like in a big cape with the flag, and he's just like everything's like fuck yeah, like everyone's just super unintelligent. But like the first scene you see is like he crashes in through like some lad's living room, and he's just watching this big TV screen where there's like all these pop-up things on the screen, and this is in 2005. Do you know what I mean? So it's very mad how they predicted something like TikTok. And it's just like he's watching a TV show called Ouch My Balls, and it's just two guys kicking each other in the nuts constantly, and he's just laughing away. And then there's all these other pop-ups like boobies here, this and that, and he's just like he's in this big chair with like, you know, a straw going into his mouth and like food here, and he's just like he's completely pacified. Do you know what I mean? Like he is just a slug plugged into this fucking system, and like I actually don't see much of a difference between that and stuff like TikTok. You know what I mean?
It's gonna get there.
It is getting there, and oh jeez, but this metaverse crack, like it's
all man, fuck that. What's the need for that shit? Like,
there is none. There really is none. Like
that film does sound. I don't know if you've seen Demolition Man with Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes. It's a bit older. It'd be like 1991 or something like that. It was a decent movie, I guess, for what it is. Like, you know, it's as good as it gets with having those two at the helm. You know, it's going to be an action movie, like. But seeing it recently, like, fuck me, man. It's basically Sylvester Stallone is a cop who gets frozen. I think he gets suspended or he gets frozen, or I'm not sure why. Actually, no, it's Wesley Snipes gets frozen because he's a criminal or whatever for a certain amount of years, and I think that Sylvester Stallone's been frozen pretty much to oversee him when he gets released. And then they're both released into the future, like, I don't know, like 200 years into the future, whatever, where everyone is stupid, you can't swear, everyone just like wears stupid clothes, like sex is done with VR now and all this stuff, and Sylvester Stallone's just like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, there's never been any gun crime, everything's perfect, you know, that kind of shite. Very, very on point with how kind of things are now and how things will go, like.
Yeah, it is quite scary, especially like the VR sex thing. It's like you can already see it now in like countries like Japan, where men have just given up on the idea of finding a woman.
It's very weird. Like,
their birth rate is decreasing massively, and they're just kind of, the whole Japanese culture is just kind of programming men towards like not wanting to engage with women at all. Like, Orwell talked about this in 1984, like the abolition of the orgasm. Do you know what I mean? It's like, get rid of the family values and fucking, like, when you say the word family values, you sound like a fucking homophobic bigot. That's not what I'm trying to get at. But
no,
you know
I know
what
exactly
what
you mean. Like,
but you know what I mean? It's very strange the way it's all going, and kind of
marriage,
the value of relationships and
now,
sex is so less valued than it used to be. And, you know, fast forward that 100 years from now, what's it going to look like? Do you know what I mean?
The nuclear family ain't as bad as it's depicted. Like, it's like, if you want to do something else with your life, that's fine, but like, there's nothing wrong with, you know, two parents and kids all live in the same house and happily ever after. Like, I don't see a whole lot of my generation living their family lives the same way that maybe me and you did. You know what I mean? Like,
well, but, you know, that's the thing. Like, we can't even afford to have a fucking family now. It's like,
exactly.
Whereas in Ireland, I think the culture isn't the problem. Do you know what I mean? I still think Irish people are going to, like, you know, for a while, we're not going to buy into this kind of bollocks. But we're like, if you look at like a lot of American culture, like, their relationships are something they really take for granted. They're all like, everything I see on social media anyway is all about fucking my side hoe and my this and that and your side
divorce
dick.
Divorce rates are huge over there.
It's at least 50%, like, you know.
Like, how many people in Ireland do you know that have been married like 4 times, whereas it's 3 or 4 time marriages in America is not fucking uncommon, like.
No, well, in Ireland though, we've more of a tradition of suffering in silence and never ever considering divorce and just having a shitty relationship forever. Like,
but I imagine if 2 marriages didn't work, you'd be like, fuck it, I'm not doing that again. Like,
yeah, like Jeremy Corbyn with his 5th wife.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, fair play to Jeremy though, he's a good lad.
Supposedly.
Ah, yeah.
Anyways, man, we'll probably start closing it up there, seeing as you said you had to head away soon enough. I really appreciate having you on. It's fucking great having you on. I'll probably release this episode maybe in a week or 2 because I still have to release the Don Chi one, but it'll be out, within the next 2 weeks or so. But
Yeah,
thanks very
sweet.
much for coming on, man.
So yeah, it was a pleasure. And if anybody wants to check me out, it's Mory.rr on Instagram, Mory on Spotify. Rogue Records is the YouTube channel. That's RO-G. And yeah, thank you very much for having me, man. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers, man. All right, look, I'll chat to you soon.
All right, best of luck.
See you now.
Take care, Andy.